Hello, let's take a look at your NT10 LT4 seminar. First thing as usual, do the first 5 questions so you can review them in class and we'll see what happens after that. What I want you to learn today in this lesson is I want you to multiply binomials by applying a pattern formed by square of sums and by a square of differences and by a conjugate property, or difference of squares. We're going to learn about those. First off, when you square something, do not distribute the exponent with a plus sign. That does not work. I can show you it doesn't work if we do let's do 3 plus 5 squared. We know 3 plus 5 is 8 and 8 squared is 64. But if you do it by distributing, 3 squared would be 9. 9 plus 25 is 34. They're not the same, are they? Do not distribute. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not distribute. So if you don't distribute, what do? Well, you do exactly what we learned in the last lesson, and there might be a pattern here that might save us some time. So if I have x plus 6 squared, that means x plus 6 times x plus 6. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say x plus 6 times x plus 6. And then I'll get x squared plus 6x plus 6x plus 36. So we get x squared plus 12x plus 36. There is a pattern here. Our pattern here is if I have a binomial and I square it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to square my first and last terms. So that part I said about kind of distributing is kind of right, because when you square x, you get x squared. When we square 6, you get 36, but there's a middle term. So what I do is I take those two terms I have here. Whoops, I don't like that. Let me get a different color here. And I'm going to double their product for the middle term. So if I take 6 times x, I double it, I get 12x. That's where that comes from. You can just as well make the box just as easily, but we like to do things shorter if we can. So let's apply that on example 2. So I'm going to square my first term. And I'm going to square my last term, but I'm going to write that last because I want it. So if I square 3g, I get 9g squared. Then if I look at these two, I don't like how that turned out, I'm going to double the product. So 3 times 10 is 30. Double that, we get 60gh. If I square the last term, I get 100h squared. And there is our answer. 9g squared plus 60gh plus 100h squared. Let's try another one. How about with a minus? I still do the same thing. I square, maybe I should show my work here. So I'll square my first term. I'll multiply 2 by my first term times my second term. And I'll square my last term. The only thing you got to be careful with this is that negative. So 7d squared is 49d squared. And then 2 times 7 times negative 2, well, that's a negative. So I get negative 28 df. When you square negative, you get a positive, so you get positive 4 f squared. So whenever you have a perfect square, that is, you have a binomial, you square it. Square the first, multiply 2 times the first times the second, square the last. Now, we also have things that are called conjugates. Conjugates, they have the same term. It's just a fancy name for plus or minus. So the first one, parentheses, they have the same term, z and 5 and z and negative. It's not a perfect square though, because you got a positive 5 and a negative 5. So let's go back. Let's figure out the pattern here. If I have z plus 5, z minus 5, I'll get z squared plus 5z, z squared, not z squared, negative 5z, sorry about that. Wasn't thinking, looking ahead to the answer. So negative 5z and positive 25. So I get z squared, whoops, try that again. Positive times a negative is a negative. So I get z squared. Notice my 5's, they cancel off, don't they? And I get minus 25. So my pattern here is it's going to be the first term squared because I just squared the z minus my second term squared. That's ignoring the plus or minus. So it's z squared minus 25. Let's try that over on one a little bit harder. So I got a plus or minus here, so I square my first term, so it'll be 3y cubed squared minus my second term, which is 5 squared. So 3 squared is 9, so I get 9y to the 6 minus 25. So I gave you some shortcuts for the pattern here, but if you don't like that pattern, just draw your box and do it like we normally do. Box will take you a little bit longer, so I do want you to eventually learn to do it the shortcut on your assignment. So try to use your notes on your assignment as you go through this, because when we take our test, you got to be finished in 45 minutes.